Hi, I'm Chuck Dorsett for Weaver Leathercraft, and we are making two gorgeous leather journal covers. Now in Chapter 1, pattern, easy enough, simple measurements, and we cut our leather. No problem there. Chapter 2, our edge work, two simple hand tools, both easy to pick up. Chapter 3, it's going to be the same thing. We're going to drop in our feather design, and this is one of my favorite designs. We don't have to be top-notch toolers to make this look great. In fact, it's a relatively easy pattern. Now, we would typically jump over to my tooling surface to tool. But in this situation, we've got a big panel. So I'm going to take my quartz, we're going to step over to our pattern table, and that'll give us plenty of room. Now, any tool, leather, liquid hardware I use in this video, weaverleathercraft.com, or just look below. We've got links there, going to send you straight to the website. So let's get started on some feathers. Now, to save us a little time, I've cased my leather, or wet my leather, simple water. All manner of opinions here on how you should case this. In my opinion, I'm going to wet the entire panel until it becomes very consistent and this rich chestnut color. That's just right. Going to give that maybe 5-10 minutes, let that water wick in, and then we're ready to stamp. Now, one big trick here though. Every time I tool, I want to wet the entire panel. Even if I'm just doing a small corner up here, nonetheless, I want to wet everything, because if we're using a lighter dye, and we are, I don't want watermarks or water lines when we add our dye. All right? So, with our design here, now we have not added this actually onto our pattern and measured it out and whatnot, because it's as simple as this. I've got 8 inches top to bottom, so I'm going to drop this down 2 inches and 2 inches from the bottom. Easy enough, 12 inches top to bottom, left to right. Now, our portfolio will fit an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. With our edge, that's about 9 inches. So if I drop that in and center it 4.5, I'm spot on. But here's something that's cool. If this is a little low, no issue. It's better if it's centered, but also high. We could even bring that all the way up here. It's still going to look very cool because the feathers give it the illusion that they are hanging. Cool. Now, also, we could, okay, I'm going to roll for just a second. Very easily, we could drop in our feathers top left and top right. That would look great. All right, but let's stop rolling. Let's stick with the original design. So top to bottom, 12 inches. I'm going to bring that down to roughly 2 inches from the top, 2 inches from the bottom. Left to right, I'm going to come over 4.5 inches and center that right there. That looks good, okay? Got some small weight bags. Now this is just a suede bag filled with shot, but I'm going to use these because almost nothing will hold this down. I don't want to use a clip because my leather is wet and susceptible now to all manner of small marks, fingernails, and whatnot. But secondly, tape. I don't know what that's going to leave on my leather. Most likely it will leave some adhesive. That's going to leave an odd spot when I go to dye. So I'm just going to use a couple of small weight bags. Now, let's start here with our circle. Going to use a template. Now, if you don't have a template, no issue. Literally, a bottle top will work for you. All I need here is enough room to drop in an initial, and that's a 3/4 inch initial. So I'm going with a 1 1/4 inch, that's 1.5 inch oval or round. There we go. All right, so easy enough. Let's lift that up. There we go. I can see that, no problem. Now, for our feathers, let's take our French curve. Just like we did when we drew these need to be straight and clean. So let's drop in our French curve, line that up, and I'm going to draw that in on my leather again, because that's one part of this design that needs to be clean and tight. So just like our pattern, I'm going to draw in all 4 quill lines. And my last quill line there, need to press in a little bit. Now, I went back and drew our circle in because it was a little hard to see, but I can easily do that. Now, no problem, all right? So at this point, I'm simply going to hold down my tracing film and I'm going to trace the outside of my feather, and our tracing is done. And our last line, very good. That should look nice. All right, let's take our weights off. Pull up our tracing film. Well, that looks good. Easy to see. Now, you notice too, my leather's starting to dry out a little bit. So I'll use my swivel We're plenty wet for that. I'll use my swivel, but between swivel and bevel, I may add some water again. Now, I am notorious about not practicing my swivel when I sit down. I could have tooled a week or a month ago, but I'm terrible about sitting down and starting on my project. Let's don't do that. We're going to practice a little bit first. Now, with a swivel knife, the most common way to use this, I'm going to put my first finger in the saddle, and I'm going to draw my knife towards me. Okay, easy enough. The one thing here I don't want, though, is to lean left or right, because if I do that, I'm going to get this big lip on one side. We're either going to have to bevel that down or bevel the other side, and it's going to stick out like a sore thumb. Now, one other way we can use a swivel is we can push. And I tend to like to push because I can see where I'm going and I can prepare for that. But also too, notice my line is very light because I'm trading pressure for control. I can always come back through that line. Once it's laid down, I can drop my swivel on that, drop the angle of my blade, and again, that blade's going to follow that previous line spot on. It's going to give me a nice cut. But too, one more thing to be careful of. If we make our lines too deep, what can happen is we're actually creating a tab that's going to tear. So we do want to go a little light with our swivel. So let's jump over here. Now, again, with our tools, I am not comfortable making that cut freehand. Now, I could probably do it, but let's use our tools. Let's rely on our tools. So our feather on this side, I'm right-handed. So on this side, our feather curves to the left. So I'm going to drop in my French curve, and I'm actually going to use this as my guide for my swivel. Because again, these two lines really need to be clean. Well, cool, that's easy enough. I'm going to drop in my second. All right, very cool. Now, don't hesitate to flip your leather, because right now, that would be hard for me. Let's back up. That would be hard for me in this position to lay this down, hold this with my left hand, and cut. So let's just flip our leather, and flip as often as you need to. The outcome is the point here. So with this, now my French curve is on my left side. Same thing as our first. I'm going to drop in my first cut, and then my second cut. In fact, right here, let's go with the traditional way to use our swivel. Line that up. Let's see, get that. There we go. Nice. All right, we're going to draw. Same thing. I'm going to bring that to me. The point here, I'm using my tool. So therefore, I have two very clean straight lines. Okay? So let's flip back around. Now, from this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start right down here with my swivel, and I'm going to swivel the outside of my feather. And my last cut or two, there we go, that looks good. Now you notice too, I can really go either way, but when I push, what I tend to do is use this finger to push the knife. That way this finger only has to stare, all right? So we're lined up here. Now, from our pattern, we've got two small marks here. That's going to be a nice little detail. So I'm going to drop those in. And the end of our quill, well, that just looks fantastic. Let's add a little water and jump over to a bevel. All right, we've added a little water, giving it 5-10 minutes to dry. This is ready to stamp. Now, with a bevel, that's going to be our first move. I like a smooth bevel, but again here, we're trading pressure for control. So I'm going to make multiple passes because I don't like big tool marks. In fact, if we do it this way, that's going to be as smooth as it can be. So on a bevel, just like a shoe, our short end, toe, back end, a heel. We're going to take that heel, I'm going to drop that right in my swivel cut. Now I'm going to hold this very lightly. I'm going to pin my tool between my pinky and the edge of my swivel line. So I can simply drop that in, and notice I'm going very lightly. Pressure for control. Now let's come back. We've got more of a ridge now. Easier to keep that tool there. Now again, notice I'm keeping my tool straight up and down. That's what we're looking for. Maybe one more pass. There we go. All right, that looks good. Now the camera may not be able to pick it up very clearly. I'm trying not to get too far in here, but that's a smooth line. I've got a couple of tool marks there, so I can take my hand and just with hand pressure, run my bevel across that. Let's see if I can get that in the camera shot, how smooth and clean that is. Notice I'm very consistent across my edge there, and I've got no tool marks. Again, I apologize if that's not as clear as it can be. All right, so I'm going to bevel down and back on this quill, and the same on this. And coming up on my last line there, very nice. Now down here again, got a very thin swivel cut there, so we need to go very lightly there. There we go. All right, now, again, just with hand pressure, I'm going to smooth that out. Very nice. That is going to erase tool marks. Now, you know, I'm going a little shy as I get up to my circle here. We're going to drop in our camo. That's going to hide pretty much anything around that. Okay, so our quills are done. Looks clean. Now let's jump over to our camouflage tool, and I'm going to circle right here. Start anywhere because we're going to come back around, but as we do, we need to watch our spacing. Now, with my second hit, I'm going to take the very corner of that tool and I'm going to drop it in right into the corner of the previous tool, staying right on my circle. Well, that looks good thus far. Now, as I'm coming around, I need to check my spacing because I can drop this in and just eyeball 1, 2, 3. I'm going to be a little short. So what we need to do is we need to, right here, bring our tool a little further in on that corner. Let's bunch this just a little bit. There we go. Now it'll be unnoticeable, but I'm really making up some room there per stamp. And we get around to here. That's going to fit just right. Okay. Well, that portion looks good. Now, let's jump over to a letter stamp. I'm going to drop in a D, my initial. But on our letter stamps, we need to look for this small arrow. Now, again, going to be hard for the camera to see that, but you'll notice I drop a little tape in there. If I can see that letter or that arrow and that tape, I know my letter is right side up. So right here, nice easy circle. All I have to do is drop that in, center it, 2 good shots. There we go. Now that looks nice. Now notice too, I might be a little weak on my top side there. If that's the case, it's easy enough. I can feel that stamp sit right back down in. Now I'm going to leave my tool that way a little bit and come in a little harder on the top. Beautiful, very clean and consistent. All right, we are moving along and our feathers look great. So I'm going to go back to my bevel and I'm simply going to work my way around our feather. One more step after that and we're done tooling. And there we go, smoothing out my last line. Well, very nice. Well, that looks good. Now, is it perfect? Absolutely not. My bevels could be cleaner, my swivels, and my stamps could be cleaner. But in all honesty, I fully believe that even the best toolers out there would agree that if I'm happy with my work and I enjoy it, you know what? That's all that matters. Now, we're going to add one more tool, and this is a background shader. Here we go. What we're going to do is use this tool to create our feather lines. Now I'm going to put the heel of the tool right against the quill and I'm simply going to drag that across the feather. That is going to add an incredibly cool touch. Now because we've beveled here, we've beveled down here, I don't really have a problem with this jumping over to the larger area, but I do need to be careful and make sure I try not to let this drag outside my feather. So let's drag that across, and I'm going to go down both sides of my feather, and the same on the other. And coming down to the end of that feather, right down to there. Well, does that not set those feathers off? That is a nice detail. Now, though, I noticed too, as I'm dragging that tool across, In a couple of little areas here, I'm actually pushing the leather out a little bit. So let's take our bevel, jump back across this, and just with our hand again, let's just smooth that edge out. And coming around the end there. All right, too, if I let that tool slip a little bit outside of my line there, by running our bevel back across there, that's going to knock those out as well. All right, there we go. We are almost there. Let's do just one more detail. I'm going to take a modeling spoon, and I'm simply going to lightly run this across the areas I've beveled. This is going to soften my edge just a little bit. Round it just a touch so it doesn't have such a hard outside edge. Well, on these I could not be happier. And again, perfect? Absolutely not. A, their feathers don't need to be. But secondly, you know, I think that looks great. I could not be happier with our feathers. That background tool, nice touch. Really makes those feathers pop. All right, our tooling is done. Now what we're going to do, follow me to chapter 4. We're going to drop in, we're going to glue in our panels, our back flaps. Then we're going to chisel those, trim that edge, and we are ready to hand sew these beautiful journal covers.